You've been flagged for unrealistic expectations, the CFO said, trying to sound paternal while publicly gutting me in front of 200 employees on the all-hands Zoom. The screen went quiet. My camera was off, but I could hear someone drop their coffee mug. Maybe it was mine, or maybe it was the sound of my patience finally shattering. Unrealistic expectations? That's what they called it. It increased our solvency margin by 11% in Q2 using nothing but duct tape, rolled up debt, and a spreadsheet from 2008 that still ran macros like it had a grudge. I was the one who'd quietly patched the holes left by finance bros who thought cash flow was a vibe, not a number. And now I was the problem. That's when I knew, not suspected. Knew. They didn't understand what I did. Not really. They thought I was just a numbers person, buried somewhere between accounts payable and coffee machine maintenance. But that moment, that smug little slap in the face wrapped in corporate jargon, lit a fuse I'd been keeping dry for years. And if you've made it this far, let me ask one thing. Smash that like button like it's a CFO's ego, and subscribe so you don't miss the part where it all burns down. Trust me, 95% of you are lurking without hitting that sub. It really does help the team keep these stories coming. All right, back to the fire. See, they called me Senior Director of Financial Architecture. Sounds impressive until you realize it just means I built invisible bridges between chaos. Intercompany debt ladders, cross-collateral guarantees, smoothing mechanisms no one noticed unless I stopped maintaining them. I didn't ask for attention. I was too busy keeping the company solvent while executives played budgetary beer pong. Every quarter, I submitted reports that no one read. Every month, I flagged issues legal never got around to. Every week, I rewired some disaster stitched together by a man named Brent, who still thought a ballpark estimate meant rounding to the nearest million. I wasn't flashy. I didn't have a corner office or a six-syllable title ending in strategy. I had results, which, turns out, makes you a threat in rooms where image beats impact. Still, I kept receipts. Specifically, a clause 6.7, asset seizure via cross-default, hidden in plain sight inside the revised loan exposure protocols. It was boring, dense, written in legalese so dry you'd need a humidifier just to read it. But it was there, and it was binding. Months ago, when we refinanced 3 subsidiaries under one umbrella to stabilize interest rates, I saw an opportunity. I proposed a clause that linked them via technical default triggers, meaning if one went down, the others could be liquidated to cover losses. A firewall, I called it, just in case. Legal skimmed it, approved it. Everyone signed. No one thought I'd ever use it. Hell, even I wasn't sure I ever would. But that changed the moment they decided to freeze my salary and hang me out like week-old sushi. Didn't even bother unmuting myself on the call. I just closed my notebook, opened a private tab, and started the countdown. They thought I was gone after that. Just another mid-level burnout story. Shame what happened to Linda, someone probably said in Slack before sending a gif of a dumpster fire. But here's the thing they didn't get. I don't make noise. I make systems. And my system had just gone live. It started subtle. An expired renewal form here, missing authorization signature there. Just enough to gum up the gears of a few friendly little loans, like the $8.2 million credit line for Brayton Logistics that technically expired if not renewed by my office every 90 days. Oops, guess who didn't hit that button this time? I watched the first alerts trickle in through my home terminal like storm warnings. A flag from the compliance monitor. A soft error on the reconciliation server. Nothing catastrophic yet. But I knew what came next, and I knew exactly how long it would take. The clause was designed to auto-escalate if defaults weren't resolved within 72 hours, which meant, unless they figured it out fast, they were 3 days away from a financial heart attack. I made tea, not chamomile, black, strong, no sugar, because sometimes revenge isn't a scream. It's a quiet switch flipped by someone you forgot was in the room. Part that stung wasn't the freeze. It was the applause. Right after finance dropped the bomb, Linda's salary will be temporarily frozen pending further review. Some moron on the call actually clapped. The CFO's words were still echoing through the muted grid of faces, and there it was, a slow, uncertain, idiot's clap, like we were at some bootleg awards show for Betrayal. Unrealistic expectations. That's what they called my models. You know, ones that got us through 2 liquidity crunches, a vendor scandal, and that delightful little moment when our CEO tried to acquire a company that turned out to be three dudes and a Weebly site. I sat there for a full 10 seconds, blinking at my screen. The CFO kept droning, something about maintaining financial discipline during uncertain market conditions. I didn't even hear most of it. My ears were ringing. My hands, weirdly calm, closed my notebook. My eyes scanned the bottom of the screen where the meeting timer ticked up. I remember thinking, 41 minutes into the circus, and they finally got to the execution. No one unmuted. No one messaged me. Cowards, all of them. The same people who used to ping me at 11:47 p.m. because, Linda, you're the only one who understands how the LuxCap revenue flows interact with Q4 headcount modeling. Same people who called me the oracle when I predicted a supplier insolvency 3 months before it happened. Now they were statues. Silent, watching. I didn't say a word, I just logged out. It felt surgical in a way, like watching your own amputation in real time. No anesthesia, just a clean slice and the quiet horror of everyone pretending it's business as usual. I sat in my living room after that, staring at nothing. No music, no wine, just me and the humming sound of a system still spinning. I felt nothing at first. Numb, like my brain had detached itself and left a voicemail saying it'd call back when it was safe. Then something broke, not loudly, not dramatically, just a click. Cold fury like ice cracking underfoot. Sharp, sudden, and dangerously quiet. I opened my old file directory, the one they never touched because no one knew it existed. Legacy Clauses, it was called. Dusty little folder from 3 rolls ago, when I was still junior enough to be ignored but senior enough to slip things through compliance. And there it was. Clause 6.7, Asset Seizure, Cross-Default Conditions. Still there, still signed, still active. I remembered writing it back when our legal team was half-drunk on IPO fumes and would greenlight anything that sounded protective. I sold it as a firewall, smart mechanism to prevent insolvency chain reactions. I even color-coded the triggers in the appendix to make them easy to follow. No one read the appendix. They never do. That clause gave the firm the right, no, the obligation, to seize and redirect assets across any subsidiary in technical default. It was designed to prevent a single sinking ship from pulling down the fleet. Except, what happens when the person holding the bilge pump walks off? Hovered over the document. It had been refiled 6 times over the years, but no one ever revoked it. No one even modified it. Because nobody really understood what it did, not completely, except me. I opened my messages, one recipient, General Counsel. Subject line blank. I attached the clause, no body text, no signature, sent. Then I set a timer. 72 hours. That's how long it would take before the first renewal, one that required my sign-off. Expired, just a little forgotten obligation on a short-term credit facility, propping up a warehouse deal in Kansas City. Not a headline maker. Just enough to count as a technical default. I closed my laptop, folded my hands, let them think I was licking my wounds, let them think I'd been neutralized. Let them think freezing my salary was a warning to others. The storm had already started. They just didn't hear the thunder yet. I didn't slam any doors, throw a fit, didn't even take my usual mug. Just packed up my things with the same calm I used to balance our quarterly cash flow against 6 overdue invoices, and a CEO on a yacht pretending we weren't in pre-bankruptcy limbo 2 years ago. My badge went into a plain manila envelope. No post-it note, no angry scribble, no cryptic quote from a burned-out analyst on Reddit. Just the badge. The final symbol of my silence. I left it on the desk of my department's admin assistant. Mel, sweet kid, still believes in performance reviews and trust falls. She looked up like she wanted to say something, but the words got lost somewhere behind her sympathy and the free bagels they bring in on Fridays to keep morale just above mutiny. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Better than most," I said. Then I walked out. They assumed I'd vanish, of course, that I'd spiral, maybe take a yoga retreat. Brand as a fractional CFO, post passive-aggressive LinkedIn thoughts about resilience and knowing your worth. But I didn't go far. I just went quiet. That afternoon, I remote accessed the compliance server through a private instance I set up years ago, originally just to run overnight audits while everyone else slept. One click pulled up the trigger matrix I designed in the early days of the LuxCap restructure. It was primitive by today's standards, beautiful in its simplicity. Each subsidiary had its own timer. Each timer was linked to a renewal protocol. If those weren't refreshed by me within their window, they expired. That triggered a soft flag. If 3 or more flags hit within 72 hours, the system auto-compiled a compliance packet based on Clause 6.7 and submitted it to our legal distribution list. Asset seizure, cross-default, auto-initiated, irreversible, kind of clause you build when you've seen too many men in blazers gamble with everyone else's pensions. I flipped the first switch. Brayton Logistics, 4:43 p.m., flagged. Then Luxcap Freight, 5:02 p.m., flagged. Then I waited, nothing dramatic, no sparks flying. No red lights blinking across the building, just silence, like the moment after you flick the first domino. Meanwhile, I opened my personal email. Drafted one message. No subject, no greeting, no pleasantries. Just one attachment, the original Clause 6.7, still intact, still binding. The final version with my signature at the bottom. I sent it to General Counsel's direct inbox. No CC, no BCC, let them sit with it alone. Then I deleted the draft, emptied trash, logged out. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I was free, because I knew something they didn't. I was still in the building. Not physically, not officially, but structurally woven into every system they'd never bothered to understand. I didn't need to kick down the door. I was the door, and I had just locked it from the outside. Let them assume the worst was over, that they'd pulled off some elegant corporate decapitation, that I was gone, licking wounds in some sad airbnb with a yoga mat and a dream. Let them believe they'd won. All I needed was for Friday to arrive. And at 9:00 a.m. sharp, something they never saw coming would greet them with a legal smile and a compliance timestamp. The first tremor hit Wednesday at 9:17 a.m., exactly 41 hours after I walked out. It arrived not with sirens, not with someone running down a hallway waving spreadsheets, but with a bland email from an external audit firm reviewing Brayton Logistics Q3 cash flow. Subject line item 47C irregularity in guarantee documentation. That was the official phrase. But behind the scenes, it translated to, where the hell is Linda's renewal signature? Brayton's $8.2 million credit facility had a 90-day rollover clause. Every quarter, a fresh signature from the designated financial architect was required to renew the intercompany guarantee that kept the rate stable and the loan technically compliant. It was a paper formality, one that nobody ever paid attention to because I always handled it before anyone noticed. Except this time, no renewal, no signature, no bridge, just a dangling liability and an auditor with a checklist and a hard-on for procedural gaps. By 11:03 a.m., the problem hit internal compliance. By 11:16 a.m., it was escalated to legal. By noon, Director of Risk Management called it a minor procedural oversight. That's what they do at first, downplay. Pretend it's a hiccup. Pretend it'll be fixed with one email and a strongly worded memo to tighten internal controls. But it wasn't a hiccup. It was a grenade missing its pin, and it was already rolling across the boardroom floor. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, refreshing a feed only I could see, compliance pings, escalations, chatter on internal comms I still had read-only access to. They hadn't revoked it yet. They'd moved fast to erase my presence from the org chart, but they missed the back door I'd left open in the audit logs. At 1:12 p.m., a call between two directors, recorded and transcribed thanks to the internal training compliance tool, hit my feed. First voice, wait, this default, doesn't it cross-trigger the Luxcap debt too? Second voice trembling and Brayton, Jesus. Brayton's locked into a back-to-back covenant. That loan's cross-collateralized. If Brayton triggers, Luxcap goes down with it. Silence. Then, should we call Linda? They didn't. Of course they didn't. Pride's a hell of a drug. And hubris is cheaper than admitting you fired the only person who knew which wires connected to which bombs. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just opened a small notepad on my screen and wrote one line. D2, Event 1 logged. Because that's what it was, an event. A precise domino falling into place. The first of 3 needed to meet the activation threshold buried in Clause 6.7. The system didn't just wait for catastrophe. It waited for pattern, for proof, for convergence. They didn't realize how close they were to it. Because in their world, technical default is just something you pay a lawyer to rephrase. But in mine, it's a match tossed into an office full of paper promises. Back inside their walls, the story changed fast. By Wednesday evening, a whisper campaign had started, that I'd forgotten to sign something, that it was an honest mistake, that I'd been under pressure, stress, maybe even unstable. Unstable. That's the word they use when a woman builds something they don't understand. Let them whisper. I wasn't planning to correct the narrative. I was planning to end it. Thursday morning, 6:42 a.m. Legal finally noticed the fire they were standing in. Someone, probably an overworked junior with a knack for suffering, dug into the legacy contract binder for Brayton's loan structure and unearthed clause 6.7. They were looking for a lifeline, a loophole, a way to reframe the default as administrative rather than technical, something they could massage away with a late-night memo and a hearty LinkedIn post about lessons learned. But what they found instead was a fully activated compliance clause tied to a chain of intercompany obligations and an auto-execution condition set to fire at precisely 09:00:00 Friday morning if not manually disarmed by the original architect, which was me. The clause wasn't a bluff. It wasn't a footnote. It was a system. I'd operationalized it 3 years ago during the last debt cycle review. They all signed it, legal, risk, compliance, because back then I was still invisible, still just Linda, and no one believed someone without a C title could script their own nuclear option. At 7:08 a.m., a calendar invite pinged across the legal team. Emergency Review Clause 6.7. 30 minutes later, the full team was in a conference room, whiteboard littered with arrows and acronyms, panicked hands drawing red boxes around seizure triggers, and autocompile functions like they were unraveling the zodiac letters. At 8:03 a.m., a junior counsel named Brandon made the call that should have been made 48 hours earlier. To the CFO. I know this because Brandon, poor, sweet Brandon, accidentally left the call transcript open in the shared legal drive I still had shadow access to. Sloppy, but poetic. Or he said, voice shaky, this clause isn't theoretical. She built the trigger framework. It's active. The CFO's voice, calm but low, okay. What do we do? You can't, Brandon replied. The auto-execution is hosted on a private instance. Not IT managed. We don't have access. We can't stop it without her credentials. Silence. 4 long seconds of it. Then the CFO, is this a joke? No, sir. What happens if it fires? Another pause. Liquidation notices. Forced asset evaluation. Jurisdictional filing in all states where subsidiaries are registered. And who sees it first? Creditors. It's funny. For all their puffed-up strategy decks and quarterly growth rituals, they always forget the one rule I lived by. Don't design a system unless you're ready to let it run without you. They thought they had cut me out. But all they'd done was remove the one person who understood how the bones were wired. Sat on my balcony with a legal pad in my lap, tracking the play-by-play. One hand stirred a cold brew, the other updating my personal timeline. T-minus 16 hours. No panic in me, no rage, just precision. There's something peaceful about watching people finally realize the walls were made of paper. Meanwhile, legal descended into chaos. They pulled in outside counsel. Someone called a former compliance officer who now teaches risk management at Rutgers, even tried to reach my old assistant, who was too busy working her new job at a competitor's office across town. Nothing worked. They couldn't override the clause because the override path was physical. As in, on a secured USB device tied to a biometric scan I never handed over. That was the failsafe. That was the point. At 11:44 a.m., they tried calling me. I didn't answer. At 12:02, another ping hit the feed. A new folder created on the internal server named Clause 6.7 Response Plan. Empty. By 2:30 p.m., someone from Risk pinged the CEO's executive assistant with a one-line message. This might be existential. Might. They still didn't know for sure. That's the genius of systems like this. They don't explode all at once. They rumble. They make you guess. They force you to sweat while the timer ticks, louder and louder, like a countdown on the inside of your skull. I closed my laptop, stood up, walked to the window and looked out over the city I used to keep solvent with a few keystrokes and a prayer. Tomorrow would be Friday. And some lessons don't come with second chances. Thursday night, 11:14 p.m. Most of the building was dark, save for the 19th floor, where the glass walls of the executive conference room glowed like a fish tank full of drowning men. CFO had called it an urgent alignment session. The invite read, though everyone knew what it really was, a last-ditch scramble before the hammer dropped. At first, he tried to keep the tone upbeat. His sleeves were rolled, his voice just a touch louder than normal, like volume might compensate for fear. All right, he said, slapping the table like he was still in control. We've had some turbulence, but this is solvable. No one corrected him. No one reminded him that solvable problems don't come with countdowns. On the far wall, a massive screen displayed a dashboard no one in that room had ever noticed before. It had been part of the internal audit suite, buried under 6 layers of navigation, titled in dry compliance language that screamed "Ignore me." But now it screamed something else. Auto Seize Protocol, scheduled 08:59:59 a.m. Someone had clicked into the backend. Trigger status, active. Override path, none. Approval, required L. Walker, they'd tried everything. The first attempt was brute force. IT specialists summoned in from home, bleary-eyed and trembling, told to just break the damn lock. But they couldn't. The execution server was off-network, authenticated with a biometric key tied to my ID and a physical dongle that had last pinged from an unknown device 2 weeks ago. Their second plan, legal fiction, could claim she was terminated with cause, one exec offered. Void the clause on grounds of no, someone else cut in. She resigned, voluntarily. The clause is airtight. Third plan, panic. Around the table, people sweated through linen and pretended not to. The head of risk sat with both palms on the table like he was trying to ground himself. General counsel just stared at the screen, mouthing the countdown like it was a prayer. One by one, they looked to the CFO. Call her, someone finally said. I tried, he muttered. 3 times. Email, she hasn't read anything since Monday. Then send someone to her house. The room fell silent. They all thought it, but none of them wanted to be the one to knock. Meanwhile, across town, I sat in my apartment with the lights dimmed low, headphones in, listening to Ravel's Pavane for a Dead Princess on loop. Not for irony, for precision. It timed out perfectly with the countdown in my head. I thought I was playing hard to get. That maybe if they groveled, if they acknowledged my worth, I'd ride back in like a reluctant hero, keyboard blazing to save the day. But this wasn't a tantrum. This was design. This was code embedded into their foundation because no one read the footnotes. This was consequence dressed in compliance. I checked my private dashboard. Still live, still locked. The system I'd built didn't ask for permission. It just followed instructions. Auto Seize Protocol, T-9 hours, 45 minutes. Status, awaiting trigger window. Trigger source, Luxcap Logistics / Brayton Holdings technical default confirmed. I clicked open my notes, updated the log. Event 2 confirmed. Auto sequence engaged. Back at headquarters, the CFO paced like a caged animal. He was still clinging to hope. That's the thing about men like him, they mistake proximity for control. Thought because he sat at the head of the table, the levers belonged to him. But they didn't, they were mine, and I'd already pulled them. At 12:36 a.m., someone in the room finally asked, why did she do this? No one had an answer, but I did, because when you freeze out the architect, the building remembers. And come morning, it would fall. Friday, 6:04 a.m. A courier arrived at the boardroom with coffee and a manila folder. Only one of those things would be welcome. The folder wasn't marked confidential. No stickers, no urgent tags, just a rubber band around 50 pages of what looked like old contract printouts, clause 6.7 highlighted in thick orange Sharpie like someone wanted to scream through paper. It had been sent anonymously, but they knew who it was from. Marcy. My old colleague from compliance, laid off 6 months ago during strategic restructuring. He was quiet, brilliant, allergic to drama. And apparently a digital hoarder, thank God. Somewhere in her personal files, she'd saved the fully annotated copy of the clause I'd written, with footnotes, diagrams, and my original signature, still perfectly legible under the words execution binding as of 2020-04-14. She hadn't shared it when the layoffs came, but she shared it now. Because when legal started leaking panic, word got around. Marcy, like most of the quiet women they discarded, didn't forget who held things together when everyone else was playing politics in the lunchroom. The board members, some of whom had flown in on red eyes and hadn't yet changed out of their travel suits, huddled over the printout like it was a scroll from a doomsday cult. Clause 6.7, line 13. Any technical or material default within subsidiary or partner entity frameworks shall permit, not require, the initiating of forced asset liquidation across entities bound by intercompany loan or credit guarantees upon non-renewal or inactivity of designated signatory. Translation, one screw up and the rest of the machine eats itself. Translation of the translation. Linda was the firewall, and Linda was gone. My signature had tied the guarantees together like blood vessels. They thought I was just operations, just the lady with too many spreadsheets and a love for quiet offices. Just background noise. But the signature was real, and they couldn't recreate it, because no one bothered to ask what would happen if the person behind the signature ever left. I sat across town in a quiet corner of my apartment, still wearing the same gray cardigan I'd worn the day I resigned. I wasn't tired. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was distant, observing, watching a planet implode from orbit. My phone buzzed. A single text from an old friend, Jules, my former analytics manager who left last year after the CFO cut his team by half and told him to get creative. "Wanna grab breakfast after this?" I smiled. Jules always had great timing. Across the city, the board finally realized the walls weren't caving in, they had already caved. The collapse had just been quiet. Structural, the kind of collapse that starts years earlier with a single missed clause and a woman they mistook for a cog. By 6:39 a.m., the CEO had joined the meeting via Zoom from his summer place in Tahoe. His face looked waxy. He hadn't shaved. He hadn't read the clause. He just stared at the header on the screen, Auto Seize Protocol, status engaged. He blinked. "What does it mean?" he asked. The general counsel didn't respond, just slid the manila folder forward until it filled the frame of the camera. "Sir," he said, his voice flat, she holds the thread. It was 6:47 a.m., and the board finally understood. They didn't fire a woman. They fired the knot that held the entire web together. At exactly 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the scheduled detonation, I logged into the legal sync call. The Zoom room was already full: CFO, General Counsel, the Director of Risk, couple board members leaning off camera pretending they weren't watching with heart rates like jackhammers. I recognized the look on their faces. I'd seen it before, during quarterly forecasts, right before I told them they were out of runway, but they'd still boarded the plane. No one said a word at first, they just stared. I wore a neutral-toned blouse, no earrings, hair pulled back, no drama, no makeup. I didn't need armor. I was the storm. I sipped tea, Earl Grey, piping hot, and then with one click I shared my screen. One slide, white background, black font, nothing else. Clause 6.7, asset seizure cross-default status, active, that was it. No diagrams, no bullet points, no explanation. They knew what it meant now. The CFO leaned in like proximity would save him. "Linda," he croaked, this can be reversed, right? I mean, if we reactivate your status, we could, there's time." Right. I didn't blink, just watched him sweat. He looked like a man trying to make a handshake with a guillotine. Legal broke first. "Miss Walker," the general counsel said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "The firm was not aware that this clause had been made operational. It was signed," I said, voice calm, "4 years ago, approved, executed. You filed it yourself." He looked down. Probably at a copy he'd printed that morning in a panic, hoping it wasn't real. CFO fumbled again, trying to weaponize familiarity. "Linda, we valued your contributions. This doesn't have to go this way. Just tell us what you need." I looked straight into the camera, and I said nothing. I let them feel it, the full weight of silence. The kind of silence that follows a countdown, not a conversation. Finally, I spoke. Slowly, precisely. "You can't freeze the architect and expect the structure to hold." That was all. I clicked end share. Watched the slide disappear like it was the last lifeboat drifting away from a burning ship. At 8:57 a.m., I ended the call. No fanfare, no farewell, just silence. I walked to the kitchen, topped off my tea. The city outside buzzed with Friday traffic, completely unaware that inside 3 corporate offices, a legal auto-destruct was already mid-sequence. I sat by the window, the sun cutting a warm stripe across my desk. Private dashboard blinked once. Auto Seize Protocol, execution initiated 08:59:59 a.m. No alarms, no explosions, just systems doing what systems do, following instructions, following my instructions. Let them call the attorneys. Let them cry for reversals and beg for boardroom resets. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some threads, once pulled, unravel the whole damn thing. 8:59:59 a.m. The room went still, breathless, like the air itself was afraid to move. Then, blink. The boardroom screen refreshed. No sounds, no fireworks, just a quiet cascade of new tabs opening on the massive display like dominoes. Each one titled the same: Auto Seize Protocol, filing submitted, jurisdiction, Delaware status, executed, jurisdiction, New York status, executed, jurisdiction, California status, executed, 3 states, 3 entities. 3 filings, each timestamped to the second, each triggering the next. The CFO stepped back as if distance could reverse it. His face drained of color, his lips parted, but no sound came out. General Counsel lurched forward like a man trying to unplug a bomb mid-blast. "Shut it down," he shouted. "Override it." But they couldn't. The system was sealed. There was no admin account, no failsafe. Only the protocol, running, obedient, unstoppable. Clause 6.7 had always been a knife in a sheath no one thought would be drawn. But now it was in freefall, slicing through layers of assumption, arrogance, and negligence like wet tissue paper. Back in my apartment, I watched it all unfold from a clean, private feed. No commentary, just log entries ticking forward. Brayton Holdings seizure initiated, Luxcap Logistics asset freeze triggered, intercompany guarantee suspension effective immediately. I didn't smile, didn't cry, didn't move. I just reached to my side and closed the laptop with the same motion I'd used 1,000 times in meetings they never invited me to. Across town, the firm's financial spine had just shattered. And then at 9:01 a.m., my phone buzzed. One notification. Deposit received, $2,750,000. Retention clause buyout initiator, Walker, L. They never read the footnotes. Ever noticed that my retention clause, filed 4 years ago, was still active, still binding? Not revoked, not reassigned, and triggered automatically if my departure was unacknowledged during a contract renewal window. They froze my salary and accidentally paid me more than I'd made in 8 years combined. I poured the last of my tea, cool now, but still bitter, not unlike the irony. Across the city, phones were lighting up. Creditors, legal firms, media sniffing around, systems stalling, assets locking. By noon, 3 departments would be dismantled, 6 board members would resign to pursue other opportunities, and an acquisition proposal, quietly waiting in the wings, would snap the firm up for pennies on the dollar. Mine. I walked into my new office, different view, same skyline. On the wall behind my desk, I'd already hung the printout. Clause 6.7, asset seizure, cross default, initialed by every executive who'd ever called me invisible, framed in matte black. Next to it, a brass plate etched with one simple line. Next time you freeze someone, make sure they don't hold the thermostat. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.